Great. Okay. So we're going to be recording this. All of our open data journeys will be live, or they'll be recorded and then uploaded to YouTube shortly after. So if you missed one, you can always go back to our YouTube channel to check it out. This is our second open data journey, so we're excited to be putting it on with you today. I'm just gonna rearrange this quickly. Okay, so welcome to today's second open data journey. We're going to be looking at noisy neighborhoods in New York City and showing you some tools that you can use to explore New York City open data that has to do with noise. So we've all signed in, and now we're going to quickly do a short introduction to the journey today, and then Gabby and Onedeige will be leading you through the journey, and then we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer and remarks at the end. So open data journeys are a new series of events that we've been putting on, or we just started to put on, and they basically take our curriculum that we've designed for our Civic Innovation Fellowship program, and it presents it in a way that's accessible in this virtual environment now. So we're taking these exercises and worksheets that we've traditionally done in person and taking people on guided journeys through them so they can still learn all about open data and engage with it. Today, I'm joined by Gabby and Onedeige, which I said, so I'll let them introduce themselves quickly. Gabby and Onedeige.
Hi, everybody. My name is Onedeige James, and I'm a Civic Innovation Apprentice at BetaNYC, and I'm happy to be here to help share this journey.
Hi everyone, my name is Gabby Langston. I'm a Civic Innovation Apprentice with BetaNYC, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you, and thanks for being here today.
Great. And my name is Kate Nicholson, and I am a staff member at BetaNYC. So why are we interested in open data? Open data is a terrific resource for New Yorkers, and it is our mission to make sure that all New Yorkers have equal access to it and have the means to use it to improve their community. And just want to shout out that the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics recently, this week, launched or just released their latest Open Data for All report. And so you should all check that out. It has sort of updates on new data sets, and there's a lot of exciting things that have been happening lately with COVID and new data sets and collaborations across agencies for updating data sets and creating more information for New Yorkers to keep a beat on what's happening. So today we're exploring noise. Noise is a community issue, it's a city issue, it's a personal issue. We are interested in it because it often can be related to other actors on the street. And so it's a great opportunity for us to look at other data and sort of apply analytics and tools to understand the issue more and come to resolutions. So this journey has been adapted from our curriculum, like I mentioned. It originally was designed to show community board members how to use 3 different tools, which Gabby and Onedeige will introduce, that guide resolution writing around liquor license renewals. So in today's journey, we're going to be asking a few questions. Where is commercial noise an issue in certain neighborhood? What are the commercial establishments nearby the noise? And is there a history of violation? And what else can we associate with it? Just as a quick background, our noise code is in place to balance the vibrancy of our city and the needs of those who live and work here. Noise is something that the Department of Environmental Protection and the police department are in charge of enforcing guidance around. And you can report noise complaints through our 311 service, and it is recorded as different complaint types that then contain different descriptors. So it's important to note just that, noise can be coming from many different sources. And in today's journey, we're going to be looking specifically at commercial noise, partly because it's interesting to look at the difference between this year and last year with less commercial activity on the streets in the past 6 months. The data sets that we'll be pulling from today are the 311 service requests, the state liquor authority licenses, and the New York State Liquor Authority Mapping Project data set, and CompStat. And these are the 4 tools that we'll be using to guide our journey: BoardStat, SLAM, LAMP, and Crime Mapper. And Gabby and Onedeige will walk you through this, but the sort of essence of what we're doing and how we're doing it is we're identifying a hotspot or just a place in a neighborhood that has some noise activity using BoardStat. Then we're going to investigate it, investigate that area and liquor licenses in that area using SLAM. And then we're going to learn more about the license and the owner of that establishment using LAMP. And lastly, we'll explore criminal activity around the hotspots to see how it might contribute to the noise. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to our apprentices. Gabby's up first. And I'm gonna let you share your screen now, Gabby.
Okay, hi everyone. Is everyone able to see my screen? Okay, okay,
Yep.
awesome. Awesome, all right. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, so today I'll be discussing how to use BoardStat, SLAM, as well as LAMP to look at noise in Manhattan Community Board 12. Okay, so it's just an outline of Manhattan Community Board 12, just to get a sense of the geography. And as Kate mentioned earlier, today I will be using BoardStat to highlight areas in Manhattan CB12 that have a cluster of noise complaints. So BoardStat is a way of visualizing 311 data. It was made by community board districts, and it was pulled directly from the New York City Open Data Portal. And speaking of 311, the New York City 311 app is actually one way to report problems. Okay, so New Yorkers are able to file or report noise as a 311 request, and it can be recorded in a variety of categories as we have listed here, and we'll actually be focusing on one of these categories today. Okay, so keeping that in mind, when we use BoardStat, this is actually BoardStat's main page for community boards. And just to keep in mind, we are in Manhattan, so that'll affect, some of the metrics we'll see on the dashboard. Okay, so for instance, in the top left quadrant, you have the top 10 complaint types. To its right, you have a map view of New York City. And on the bottom left, you have counts that are grouped by complaint type and descriptor. And on the bottom right, you have counts that are grouped by location. So for instance, if you're interested in seeing the total number of requests for a specific address, that would be the place to go. Okay, and then lastly, we have these purple page tabs on the left-hand side that allows you to navigate to all the pages within BoardStat. Right now we're on page 2, which is View by Community Board. And I actually will use a few of these pages today. Okay, so as an example, we can use this dashboard to answer this question. So is there a difference in New York City between March through July of 2019 compared to this year? Okay, so focusing on 2019, this is the community board page for that date range, and there are some bits of info that stood out to me. So firstly, there are about 18,500 street and sidewalk noise complaints from March through July of 2019. Also worth noting, the complaints were spread out across Manhattan with a cluster in the northern tip. So we'll focus on the same details for 2020. So from March through July of 2020, there are about 37,000 street and sidewalk noise complaints. And it is worth noting that that's actually a doubling, so 100% change in street and sidewalk noise complaints from 2019 to 2020. Okay. And also with regards to the map, in 2020, the complaints are now clustered in both upper and lower Manhattan, and they seem to have decreased in the Upper East Side. Okay, so we have heard recently that there is a noise issue in Manhattan CV12, so let's go explore it. Okay, so to do so, we head to the BoardStat website and we select Manhattan as our borough. And then once you've done so, you'll be taken to this page where we will filter Community Board 12. So keep in mind, this is page 1, also known as Set and Filter. Okay. And the drop-down menu allows us to filter to Manhattan Community Board 12. And once you've done so, you'll be taken to this interface, the same as before, except this time is filtered to CV12. It is worth noting that 4 of the top 10 complaints are noise related. So leading the pack are residential noise, followed by street and sidewalk, vehicle, and commercial. So commercial is what we'll be focusing on today. Keep in mind, these are complaints over the past 10 years. This is a default date range, and that's something we will change momentarily. Okay, and I just want to take this time to acknowledge that the vast majority of complaints are with regards to street and sidewalk noise and residential noise in CV12. Despite this, today I do plan to focus on noise-related commercial activities in order to demonstrate how to use multiple tools to investigate liquor licenses. So on that note, let's look at commercial noise. Heading back to our dashboard, commercial noise is a top 10 complaint over the past decade. In fact, it ranks 9th. But with that information, led me to ask the question, why are commercial noise complaints low compared to other noise complaints? And to help us, we'll visualize commercial noise in CV12 between 2018 and 2020. Okay, so to do so, we head to page 7 along our purple page tabs. So this is known as View Annual Breakdown. Oops. And then we'll see that the community board filter remains the same. Our next step will be to filter by date, which is from 2018 through 2020, and complaint type, which will be commercial noise. And we do so here. Filter by our date range, and then we filter by our complaint type. Okay, and after all that, we do have a bar chart displayed, and we see that according to the legend, each year has a different color. Okay, so it's worth noting that in 2018, the 2018 complaints outnumbered the 2019 complaints in every month except in November. Also worth noting that from January through April of this year, there's been a decrease in complaints. And actually from January through April, there's been a total of an 86% decrease in complaints. And lastly, the most rapid increase took place from June through July of this year. So in fact, there was a 98% increase in noise complaints from June through July of this year. Okay, so using that information, let's return to the community board page in BoardStat. So just to reiterate, commercial noise is a top 10 complaint over the past 10 years, and it ranks 9th, with about 22,000 complaints. Out of those 22,000 complaints, about 19,400 were described as being related to loud music and parties. So that's a ton of noise that's stemming from commercial activity. And so I strive to find out who indeed is responsible for this. And so to do so, let's look at the past few months to see where loud parties and music complaints have occurred. So I'm going to filter by date and look at the Explore Map feature. Okay, so to get to this page, this is now page 4 Explore Map, and I chose to filter by date range from June through August, because if you recall, from June to July of this year, that's where we saw a rapid spike in noise complaints. Okay, our next step will be to filter by complaint type. So it'll be commercial noise. And then lastly, to filter by descriptor, so loud music party. Okay, so next we want to focus on an area where there are a lot of circles, because the circles represent complaints. So we can zoom into the circles using the plus and minus icons on the top right of your screen. And once I did so, I decided to zoom in on 10th Avenue, near West 201st Street. And I found when I hovered my cursor over one of the circles, the pop-up window indicated that at 3775 10th Avenue, there were 10 complaints between June and August of this year. So just to reiterate, in the last 3 months, there have been a handful of complaints at one location. So therefore, my address of interest is going to be 3775 10th Avenue. Okay, so that got me thinking about what is at this location and who is responsible for this noise, especially considering the open street dining that has occurred this year. Okay, so is it a restaurant, bar, or sidewalk cafe who is responsible for this noise? Well, we need to look at establishments with liquor licenses, and sidewalk cafe licenses. In order to do so, we need to use SLAM. Okay, so SLAM is a tool that BetaNYC created for community boards, so they can look at data that's aggregated from numerous sources, especially with regards to noise complaints and commercial establishments. As many of you may know, SLAM is vital, in order to review liquor license applications as well as sidewalk cafe applications. And in fact, here is just a snapshot of the filters that you could use in SLAM. And this is just the same in wording. So these are the various data sets that SLAM draws from. Okay, so once you log on to SLAM, this was actually my default location I was taken to, and this is because of the GPS locator on my computer. And so our first step is to zoom into the address of interest. But before we do so, it's worth noting that there are some filters that are already enabled. And on the bottom search bar is where you can actually type in your address. And I noticed that once I began typing my address, there was a pop-up suggestion. So I went ahead, clicked on that, and was taken directly to the address.
Hey, Gabby, just quickly, did you want to hand it over to Z to just quickly share what the updates were to SLAM in the past few months? There's a few new categories that we just want to alert people to. Hey, Z, do you want to just quickly share what the work that BetaNYC was doing?
Yep, so we recently updated a few layers relating to the open restaurants. The two layers are the open restaurants themselves, directly streamed from the DOT dataset. And it's all self-certified, but we kind of just have icons relating to if they have alcohol service or if they don't have alcohol service. But if you click onto one of the points, you can also see if it's a road application or a sidewalk application. And then we added 301 complaints related to these open restaurants. So from NYPD, we pulled the social distancing and face masks. So if there's any violations relating to that on that specific point. And from the Consumer Affairs and the DOT on if the open restaurants follows regulations based on construction and all other stuff.
Cool, thanks. Back
Okay,
to you,
great.
Gabby.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Zia. Zia has been such an integral part of updating SLAM, so it's really appreciative. And because of the work he's done, we're going to be able, to get more details about noise complaints. Okay, so speaking of which, there are a variety of icons in SLAM. So first and foremost, we have the light blue chips, and these represent 311 noise complaints. Okay, so also worth noting, there are a cluster of nearby 311 noise complaints. And actually, when you hover over one of these icons, there are some crucial pieces of information. So you find that there's a pop-up window, and it lists the complaint type, the descriptor, as well as the date and time of the complaint. Okay, so another icon worth noting are the brown benches. So these actually relate to what Z was just talking about with the new filters. So these brown benches represent open restaurant with alcohol service. And when you hover over that icon, you get to see the name of the restaurant as well as the address. So this in fact shows that our address of interest is an open restaurant that serves alcohol. Okay, so our next icon will be the martini glasses, but because I chose to type in my address, the martini glasses are actually being covered by this blue balloon. So we have to click on that blue balloon in order to reveal the martini glass. And when I did, we see that there are 2 martini glasses listed, and they represent the state liquor license that expires after today's date. Okay, and with the martini glasses, we can hover over them to find out more information about the restaurant establishment. So when you hover over the first one, we see the address and the name of the restaurant. So we have a Civic wine bar. We do the same for the second martini glass. We see the second restaurant's name is Luxor, New York. Okay, so just to summarize, so far with SLAM, we've been able to observe 3 things. First, there's been a cluster of noise complaints. Second, we have 2 liquor licensed establishments. And third, there is 1 open restaurant with alcohol service. Which led me to ask, how can we find out more about the liquor license at this establishment, along with its violation history? To do so, we head back to those martini glasses. And once we've clicked on them, we can actually see that there's a pop-up window that shows a variety of information, additional information. So we see the effective date, expiration date, but this link down here is the one I'm going to focus on. Click here for more information about this license. Okay, and we do the same thing for that second martini glass. And the reason we focus on that link is because if we click on it, that will take us directly to LAMP, and LAMP is going to allow us to see details of the license and establishment. Okay, so on that note, let's dive into LAMP. It's very important to note that LAMP requires Flash. So some of the most common browsers that use Flash include Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, and Safari. And there are a variety of resources we can use to help us enable Flash in our browsers. So LAMP is an acronym that stands for the Liquor Authority Mapping Project. It was developed back in 2011, and it uses geographic information system to help people find licensing as well as geographic data. So I'll be using it today to help find licensing data. Okay, so remembering that link from SLAM for the first martini glass, the ceviche bar, once we click on that link, we're taken directly to this web page. And Something worth noting under the license status, it says that the license is inactive. Okay. We do the same for that second martini glass. So that was for Luxor, New York. And we find, in fact, the license is active. So using that information, the establishment will use, that we'll look at for noise complaints is going to be Luxor, New York. Okay, so heading back to LAMP, we do want to focus on a few bits of information, especially with regards to the premises information. And I wanted to ask myself, is this a recurring problem? In order to do so, we need to pinpoint the owner. So we look under principal name, we see that the owner's name is Juan Gores, which led me to ask, does Mr. Gores in fact own any other noisy establishments? Okay. And in order to find out, we have to head to the bottom of the page, which is search by principal. And once we click on that, we're taken directly to this web page. We can type in the owner's name, which leads us to this result. So what this table shows us is that Mr. Gores has just one establishment with a liquor license. Okay, so just to summarize, we were able to do 3 things today in Journey. So first and foremost, we visualized commercial noise in Manhattan CB12 over a 2-year period, and we found a spike in noise complaints from June to July of this year. Using that information, we identified an address with commercial noise complaints described as having loud music and parties. And lastly, we learned that there is a restaurant establishment at the address of interest and that it has one active liquor license. And it's also worth noting that the owner does not have a violation history. So on that note, I'm going to introduce Onedeige, and she will take us on an open data journey from her neighborhood in Queens.
And Onedeige, I'll share my screen for you.
Okay, no problem. Yep, you just passed it.
Just past it. There we go.
There we go.
All right. Let me get the presenting up. All right. How does that look?
Yes, perfect. All right, guys. So let's look at another borough. We're going to be looking at Queens CB2, and my new neighborhood is located here. I just moved to the neighborhood, to a neighborhood in the area, and was curious about how noise affects residents, and decided to apply the journey to this location. Next slide. So let's go back to BoardStat. Why BoardStat? To get an overview on the types of complaints in the area. And since we've been looking at noise commercial in CB12, we will do the same here. Our goal is to find the location with the highest number of complaints for noise commercial. So we navigate to page 1, which is the filter view, and here we see noise commercial in the top 10 complaints at number 10. However, it's important to note a higher instance of residential and street sidewalk noise complaints in this geographic location. Next slide. So since our focus is on commercial noise, I can just click on the bar on the graph that represents noise commercial. This will filter the other information on the page, giving us the address with the highest number of that complaint on the bottom right. We want to note this address for later. Next. This view also consolidates the commercial noise descriptors, giving us the counts at this location. We can see here that loud music and partying is the most prominent issue. So we'll take a brief look at this descriptor. So we navigate to page 4, exploring the map, and we can see we put in our filters as before, and we see a distribution of loud music and party descriptor under noise commercial. And on this map on the right, you can see that there's a large concentration of this descriptor proximal to the Brooklyn Queens Expressway by the size of the bubbles. So these are all loud music and party descriptors under commercial noise. Taking a further look at this, we want to navigate to page 6 and view the trends of this complaint type and descriptor. So we're comparing this year's trends to that of last year's in 2019. We clearly have more complaints in the neighborhood compared to last year as seen here, but we want to take it further. Next. So we expand to a 5-year comparison. So we take it from 2015 to current, and here we only see it's basically following a similar trend throughout the years, except for 2020, which is kind of doing its own thing. And we see that there's one anomaly for 2016 that had a spike in October, but we're not going to focus on that right now. So remember that address we found and saved for later? Next, let's look at the noise complaints at this address, 6703 Woodside Avenue. So we navigate to page 3, look up by address, and we keep our June to August date range and enter our address. And here we see this tree map showing the various complaints at this particular address. So clicking on commercial, noise commercial, we can see that there are 23 complaints listed. We also note that they're almost all loud music and party. And we can also take a quick look at the other noise complaints while we're here. Next. So we click on noise street sidewalk, and we see that this has 7 complaints, all with loud music party descriptors. Next. And here we have residential complaints at this address. We have 4 in total, all loud music and party as well, which is why we were focusing on that particular descriptor. So we did a history of yearly trends. We want to do a history of trends at this location. And here we see that we do have a spike of the loud music party descriptors over the years. So it has been going up. So we found a hotspot at this address, 6703 Woodside Avenue. Is there a lot of noisy commercial street activity going on around here? Now that we found this hotspot, we want to gain a different perspective. So we want to use another tool. I wonder if SLAM will give us a different perspective. So we want to see what type of businesses are in the area, as well as how commercial versus residential location is. When we navigate to SLAM, when we zoom into Queens CB2 in the Woodside area, we see a prominent stack of blue chips a short distance away from the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. And we see that it's kind of away from everything else. We're going to use the buttons on the left to display the information we're interested in. So we're going to use the buttons to open up to indicate open restaurants, 311 noise complaints, steak liquor license, and sidewalk cafe licenses. So here we have, this is a stack of actual individual noise complaints. Next slide. Yes, this is a stack of actual individual noise complaints that were made. Next. And here we have all this activity going on Roosevelt Avenue. And you can see that this is kind of located away from everything else. So it's pretty isolated. in comparison to what's going on in Roosevelt Avenue. Now we see, we can actually click on each individual on the stack and click on each individual of these and just keep scrolling through. There we go. And we can actually see the address, the complaint type, the descriptor, and the date and time it was made, each was made. All right, so now we want to navigate to the picnic table and we're going to click on that. That's right next to that stack. So when we click on that, we see that the name of the business is Puerta del Sol, and we have this lovely pop-up window that gives us some information for this restaurant. We see that it has sidewalk, roadway, and alcohol service. They were able to self-certify for that. And now on the next slide, we are going to click on the martini glass. So clicking on that pink martini glass will help us look up information on the state liquor license of the business La Puerta del Sol. Here we know this is also open restaurant with alcohol service. So we have this pop-up window. We have the same name repeated twice for these two different icons. So we can now say that, okay, this is a restaurant and bar location. Next slide. So this is one restaurant in the middle of nowhere with so many loud music and drinking complaints. So the Liquor Authority's website actually has more details on the owner and on the establishment. So next slide. So we want to look up this owner, and in order to do that, we have to navigate to LAM. And we're going to navigate to LAM directly from SLAM. So back to the last page we were on SLAM, we click on this link, and it'll take us directly to this website. And it'll give us all the details for this owner and the establishment. Now we see that the restaurant has an active liquor license available. And we also found the owner. That's the owner's name, last name first, and followed by the first name. And if we scroll down, we see that we have the ability to do searches in this tool. And so we're going to search by principal, which is the owner. And we enter in his name. And this is the query that we were able to pull up. So we see that there are no other businesses by this owner. It's just the one business with the liquor license. So there's nothing else for us to investigate at this point. So now we're thinking, okay, can we find any other information about this location? Now, personally, as a woman living in a new neighborhood, it is prudent for me to find out how safe it is. So what about this somewhat isolated establishment? Have we been investigating? And I will now use a tool called Crime Map. Now, because we've been focusing on noise, noise can be rambunctious, it can be bothersome and unwanted, especially especially as a female. And if it's too quiet, it can be ideal for crime. So let's look at Crime Map. So Crime Map is an NYPD map that displays incidents of 7 major felonies, either as individual crime, concentration of incidents by precinct, or as a heat map. Here we have an overview. I think you're one slide ahead of me. Here we have an overview of what Crime Map looks like when we first navigate to that website. And what we're going to do, next slide. What we're going to do is we're going to enter in our address of interest that we've been looking at, 6703 Woodside Avenue, in the search bar, and use the filter on the right to select crime location map and enter our date range. Now, just to note, Crime Map currently doesn't have any updates from August as yet. So here we're just looking at June and July. We see a few single incidents and one nearby location with 3 reported crimes, but there are no crimes proximal to our address of interest. Next. What we can do, we can actually identify what type of felony was reported at that location. So looking at that particular location, we could actually navigate through the crime types, and that will actually pull up the various felonies for each one. We can also do a heat map, and that will give us like a distribution of give us an overall distribution of crime around or on top of that incident, that address we've been looking at. And here we see that there's nothing really like directly near our address, but it does surround, we do have crime activity surrounding that address. So let us compare this to the SLAM map we previously looked at, right, which is this map. Now, based on everything we've looked at so far, using this tool, we can't conclude, next slide, we can't conclude that noise complaints that we have looked at to date are necessarily associated with a reported crime, but it is a useful tool and it can point out certain trends. So, in summary, we investigated an isolated commercial noise hotspot in Queens CB2. It's both a restaurant and a bar with sidewalk and roadway access. There is a history of noise complaints. The owner has no disciplinary action listed, nor owns any other businesses, and the business is actually surrounded by crime hotspots. Thank you.
Awesome.
So,
Great. So that sort of concludes our journeys. Gabby, did you want to hop in and say something?
Sure. I guess we just wanted to acknowledge that some of you here today from Manhattan Community Board 12 may be wondering why we focused on commercial noise as opposed to residential noise or street and sidewalk noise, which is definitely an issue. And we just want to acknowledge that we're aware that there is a plethora of reason noise issues, and that we will pursue results in any way possible. I just want to emphasize that today's journey focused on one type of noise complaint and utilize some of BoardStat's features. And so as a result, there is still room to kind of eliminate the noise complaints within the district. We just also want to note, we're also aware that there may be language barrier when reporting 311 requests, and that it will affect the data that is put into BoardStat. And we just want to emphasize that, so does my cat, I apologize. We also want to emphasize that the borough president, BetaNYC and other community groups are deeply troubled by these issues, and that we are indeed looking into them.
Great. So I'm just going to share the last bit, and I see a hand raised, Natalie, so I'll get to you in 1 second. All right, yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, and noise is an important issue to investigate. So we hope that, whoops, I just restarted it. So we hope that folks are inspired to use some of these tools to explore noise, and use other tools too to explore it. So I don't know why this is taking so long to load, but we're gonna do a few Q&As. So if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand, or you can write in the chat. Natalie, if you wanna ask your question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
I always feel very free. Good morning. I want to thank Board 12 folks, town folks for being here. It's a lot of information, and I thank BetaNYC for presenting it. And I will follow up with BetaNYC for some kind of further analysis, and as always, to explore how we can apply these tools to help that neighborhood. But I had a question about the presentation and going through the steps where at one point it was okay, now we can see that it's both a bar and a restaurant. And I wasn't sure what shows you that, what distinguishes a bar in this data from, let's say, a lunch counter that has alcoholic beverages on the menu in the cooler next to the Snapple.
Right, that may have been a misuse of language then. So I think we were pointing at the picnic table, right, and the martini glass. So traditionally the martini glasses, and I'm going to try to pull this up. The martini glasses originally were the indicators for any, let's just present this, for a liquor license. So it indicates that there's a liquor license there. And
Okay, so we just do need to be really careful with that, because a walk-up deli where you weigh your own salad could also have bottles of beer and wine and have a liquor license, and it does not make them a bar. And this language is so loaded that we
right.
to take care of how we use it, and that, you know, we have you know, the embarrassment of richness of the diversity of business types that we have, and we want to make sure that there's no language that is used that kind of stigmatizes them.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So yeah, so just to be clear, the martini glasses indicate that there's a liquor license, and then the brown picnic tables, if you look up here on the upper left, indicate that they're, and as Z mentioned, this is data sets that are pulling from open restaurant data sets where establishments self-certify, and they indicate whether or not they have alcohol service. Z, was there anything else that you wanted to add, or Emily?
Nope. I'm not sure if the DOT actively checks if a restaurant has a liquor license before they can actually serve alcohol in the address, but I'll try to follow up on that.
Cool. Any other questions? Tanya, I see you have a question.
Yes, hi. First of all, thank you so much for doing this and showing us the tools that are available to the community, because this has been a long-term issue, something that I've been dealing with for at least 16 years. So thank you. Yes, so I have two questions. One, well, actually maybe three, but one is, how do we, when we presenting this information, because I know you mentioned DEP and NYPD being the agencies that sort of enforce this, how do we, especially with NYPD, how do we get them to take seriously this data? And the reason I say is because I presented data like this from BoardStat, BetaNYC to them previously in previous years about noise issues and hotspots, and it really wasn't taken very seriously in terms of being legitimate in their mind. And so there was a lot of pushback on that. So that's one. The second is, how can we trace issues of noise in parks? And, you know, with this data here and BoardStat capture that, and how can we capture that? Third, how can we resolve the insinuation that only certain people are calling in 311 complaints? Because there's a lot of thrown out there of insinuation. It's like white people is doing it. And I'm talking about Community Board 12 and Washington Heights Inwood, or only certain groups doing it. How can we resolve that and get more clarity about who is actually that in terms of where these calls are coming from and these complaints are coming from? Because I would really like to see that resolved, because I feel like there is some you know, assertions being made that it's only coming from certain people and it's not coming from all parts of the community, which is what I've seen, that everybody of all races, genders, creeds, ages, everybody is calling in these issues. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Those are great questions. So to repeat, the first one was asking how to hold the bodies accountable who are responsible for managing these noise complaints. And I wonder if someone like Aldrin might have insight into that, or anyone else on the line, you know, or Emily, or I think it's hard, you know, we have the data. I think like being able to show it and track it and show that, you know, the complaints are being closed, for instance, maybe in such a short amount of time that they aren't even resolved. Maybe keeping track of that more. I don't know the exact answer, but that's question one. If anyone has ideas they want to share in the chat, please do, or come off of mute and answer. And then the second question was tracking noise in parks. I believe that you can track noise. Let's see, is there a descriptor that is specific for noise in public spaces or parks?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you can filter by Department of Parks, and then you can probably get noise complaints for there, but I'm not sure how accurate the location is. I think it's probably to the nearest intersection. So if there's noise occurring like in the middle of a park or not by a street, it might not be accurate.
Okay. And then last question, remind me what the last question was.
The last question was about
account.
insinuations about only certain people are filing these complaints, which it's not true. It's coming from all over, but I just want to know, how can we resolve that? Because all the motion, and I'm just not interested. What I want to see is actual, facts in terms of who is this coming from, and and can we resolve those issues that this is being weaponized against, people and things like that, because it just keeps coming up and there's no evidence to really prove that. I just want to know if you have the means to really get more clarity around that.
So the data is all anonymized when it goes into the system for the purposes of people's, people wanting to be anonymous when they report these things. Emily, what in the past, like how have people resolved that? Is there any way? I know that this has come up before, and let's just, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Yeah, it's not a clear-cut issue in terms of who. You can't really find out who is making these complaints. You can start to get a sense of whether these are repeat calls through the data, and you can also, I'm just looking at another question in the chat here about time to close. There is a created date and a close date time in the 311 data that can be turned into by subtracting the two, a time to a period of time to close that ticket. And so there is a page of BoardStat, actually it's page 5, I think it's called the agency page, that will start to break that down for you. If you'd like to explore that page, you can choose an agency and find that agency's average time to close tickets. So you could see that, yes, the NYPD does close out tickets much more quickly on average than, say, HPD. That's a lot about the nature of the kind of issue on some level, but it's a big topic that I think has come up in previous trainings. I believe at the public hearing from CB12 just a few weeks ago, this issue came up of developing a better methodology around how these different agencies are closing out tickets. That there's
I guess my question is not about the closing out the tickets. My question is about accusations about that these complaints are coming from particular races in areas of town as opposed to all over the community. I guess that's what I'm asking. I do know there is definitely a problem with closing out, for sure. Right. And thank you, Emily. I know you've been working with, I'm on Community Board 12, just so you know. Okay. And so I'm a board member. So I thank you for your work on that and that. But that was where my question was. And I guess because I am hearing it, it has become used very divisively. And I really just need to see how we can resolve that question.
Tanya?
Is there a way with the data to resolve it?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is Aldrin. Emily, I don't know if you know this group, but I know Noel speaks about this often. There's a group of data scientists and civic innovation individuals, and I think BetaNYC might be part of that group, that studied, whether the 311, and I think this is what you're getting at, Tanya, is there racial or is implicit bias in the data and does the data highlight certain trends, right? And I think I remember going to one forum that BetaNYC either hosted or had presenters at, that there was groups of people analyzing that. Coming from the assumption that not all language groups and not all class and racial groups use 311 in the same way or use it to the same propensity and use it. And so they were researching variation across the calls and across time and seeing if the calls were more of a certain type in communities that were gentrifying more, or if they were greater calls. So I don't know if that's getting at what you were saying, Tanya, but there are researchers and folks looking at, whether, just taking the normal social justice equity issues that people are now surfacing more than ever in 2020, as they should, and just overlaying that onto the data itself, with the assumptions that the data itself reflects some of the inequities and biases in society. So I don't know if that gets to what you were saying.
I mean, it would be helpful if you could probably email me separately. I don't want to take up all the time. Email me separately that who's working on that, because I can say people. I've been living here 16 years, and people been complaining. So long before gentrification, really became an issue. So this has been going on at least since I've been living here. So I just want more clarity on that. Thank you so much, Aldrin. Mm-hmm.
You're welcome. Emily,
Yes.
Emily, are you aware of some of that stuff? I know Noel's spoken about that in the past.
Yes, I remember an NYU team, I believe it was an NYU team who got an NSF grant to try to unpack those issues in 311, which is a massive project considering that the data is anonymized.
Anonymous, yeah, anonymous.
So there's no information about the caller's race or any of that within the data. But by overlaying with very granular census data, one can begin to develop some assumptions. But that isn't work that I'm aware of having reached any kind of conclusive answers at this point.
Emily, if I may, there are a couple of studies that got a lot of traction among popular audiences that were, for the most part, something you would dismiss as a post hoc ergo, post hoc propter hoc kind of argument, but it correlated rising rents and average affluence in the communities with the number of 311 complaints. And so that kind of is taken very often as evidence that gentrification fuels the number of complaints. And so I think it's useful to see that there's a whole lot of other data and there's very complex ways we need to read some of those studies. So the more of this we have, the more helpful.
So I just typed in a response that I just got from Noel, who kindly texted me that quickly. So he said the city does try to track, but doesn't tend to publish those numbers, and that they try to do an analysis of where calls are coming from. So I wonder, just from a civic perspective, if it would be worth, creating a survey to share with the community, just to say, have you ever submitted a request, and and what are your demographics? Could you share your demographics? And then just sort of getting a sense in general and see if there's any large disparities, if that's ever of interest. But all right, who else has hands up? So Eliza?
Yeah,
Eliza?
hi, how are you? Thank you guys. Thank you, Emily, for putting this presentation together so fast and kind of addressing as many issues as we have, especially data-wise. I don't have any questions, but I am gonna try and, when we have our conversation, to bring forth the several studies or the graphics showing the commonalities between the what is considered to be the noisiest CBs, such as CB3, 9, 10, 11, and 12. so we can talk about that and why is it that the people or the cities with the higher number of immigrants have the higher number of 311 calls, and why does the pattern reflect that, such as the same as going into the same wavelength as Natalie just talked about. And again, say thank you for this presentation, extremely useful, and use the data in a way in which is non-biased and non-critical, and use it in a way that is proactive. So thank you.
Thanks, Eliezer. Yeah, these are all great questions. This noise open data journey was in the works for several weeks now. Gabby and Onedeige were already working on it, so it was sort of it came at a time where we wanted to invite CB12 and all of you to join this webinar from them, this wonderful presentation that they gave, as a starting point to continue this conversation. There are so many interesting questions that are being raised, and the team is working on a deep data dive right now that came in through the radar system. So if you have a specific data analysis request for us, please utilize the service radar.beta.nyc, and you can submit a question that we can analyze. But we will also be following up with other kinds of trainings as needed. This noise training was already in the works weeks ago, actually. So we wanted to certainly invite you, but know that it was a starting point for more customized or anything else that you would like for going forward.
That's right. So yeah, we wanted to say hello to CB12 and everyone else here. Is there anyone else from community boards or council offices?
I want to thank CB12 as well for their interest in this. And I know there was in the chat room, some individuals mentioned that, can we do this on residential noise? And, you know, maybe you might have other interests like no heat or hot water and other things. And the answer is yes, we can. But more importantly, we hope that you can. You know what I mean? Like we've showed you this tool, and it was designed with you in mind and for you. So if you have the website and you know we hope that we've given you familiarity. You can walk through these different sheets and pages yourself and ask the different questions and really query the data set and try to, you know, the different questions you have of us. You know, we hope that you feel empowered, or, you know, other board members who have familiarity, and you could start exploring this yourselves with the liquor license database as well, and with the different databases that we've presented. So we hope that we'll be happy to do the residential noise, even heat and hot water, other things. I know this is about noise specifically, but we hope that you can as well, and that you feel comfortable using these data tools. Secondly, I like to say, and I think Tanya mentioned this point, you know, whether we dealt with gentrification, people mentioned the different, you know, but she raised a point about like 16 years making certain complaints. So not those issues notwithstanding, you know, the efficacy and the usefulness of this tool, you know, at some point folks will stop calling 311 if they feel that it's not useful, or if they feel there's no outcome, or that people are closing out cases without actually solving problems. So this should really be a problem solving tool. So we appreciate you banging this around and raising this issue, because this is an accountability issue as well. So I like the conversations about DEP and NYPD and others, because, you know, we have to let these agencies know this is a tool that was created for management, for responsiveness, for community, you know, and agency accountability and servicing. And, you know, at the moment it's not working for us. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it just seems that for some complaint types with some agencies, it doesn't seem to be working. And then the conversation needs to be then why is that? You know, and why is the issue persisting, regardless what the issue is, right? And getting, you know, to the bottom of that. And that I'm saying that I'm not, you know, I'm not zeroing in on the NYPD per se. I'm saying that for any city agency that has complaint types issued to them for further follow-up, So I think, that is one of the key roles of the community board members is keeping the accountability of municipal service provision, to be responsible and accountable. So, I thank you that you guys are, focused on this issue. And third, I would say is that some of the noise issues around commercial establishments, bars, restaurants. I know now because of COVID, there's a lot of stuff happening outside. Working through this with the, with the end goal of making the residents' lives better, but also not displacing the businesses, because we've seen instances where we lose the businesses and the next operator, the issues continue because it might be more structural or institutional in nature or whatever. So I know the city has a program MEND where inside of the oath office and where residents can mediate with the establishments, because I think you probably have a similar experience. Once you approach the establishments as a community board or as a group of residents and say, look, this is a real problem. This is that. I've heard enough instances where people say that it's gotten better, and that knowing the owner and speaking to them directly, the owner knowing what the effect this is having on your children not sleeping or on you, on different things, various mediations and various things are brought to bear between neighbor and neighbor and neighbor and business owner. And I've heard enough instances where this has worked to give me hope and optimism that, business and a vibrant commercial corridor and nightlife, whatever, could exist within a residential community. So those are just the three points that I wanted to mention from looking at it from a borough-wide perspective.
That's great, and I'm glad you mentioned MEND. I wanted that to come up at some point, and so I'm glad that it came up in your conversation. Definitely check that out. If you just Google MEND NYC, you'll come across it in the first Google search. I just am posting some information in the slide here.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
May I speak, Arlene Bronsaft? May I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Ms. Nicholson?
Yes, please do.
I want to thank you all. I thank you for inviting me. I really applaud your efforts on using data to get action. And I'm especially close to the Inwood community because it was the community in which I did my first study on the effects of noise on children's learning. And the Inwood community not only cared about the noise from the trains adversely impacting on the learning of the children PS98, they wanted something done to remedy the situation. I said the same thing you said. I said, to get action, we need data. And then I was able to work at PS98 with the principal, and we collected, as many of you know, the reading scores of children whose classrooms were exposed to elevated train noise. And we compared it with the children on the quiet side of the building. And what we found is that by the 6th grade, the children were nearly a year behind in reading. The teachers couldn't teach, the children couldn't learn, so those exposed to the noise were nearly a year behind those on the quiet side. As an academic, these data were put into a report, and I published it in an academic journal. But I did not help the child if all I did was to publish the data. If all I did was share the data. We had to take action. And I have to compliment the Inwood community because the parents, the residents, the public officials, everyone said we need action. And what happened is we got the Transit Authority, showed them the data. They had a method that was going to quiet the tracks. And we asked that that abate method be tested out next to the school. And they agreed to do that. And the Board of Education agreed to put acoustical tiles in the ceilings of the classrooms adjacent to the elevated train tracks. And so two abatement procedures were put in place. And then I was asked a few years later to go back to the school to see if these two abatements, which lowered the decibel levels, helped the children. And as my 8-year-old daughter, who said anyone should have figured out at that point that noise deters children's learning, it turned out with the abatements in place, the children on both sides of the building were reading at the same level. So it wasn't just a matter of collecting data. And that was all I really was asked to do as an academic. But I felt my obligation went beyond that. It was to make sure that data would be used to implement procedures to remedy the situation. Let me point out, we did not tell the transit authority to close down. We just said, can you run your trains in a way that the noise would not intrude on the children's learning? So in this case, I don't think you're telling the businesses to close down. You're simply saying, can we have residences and businesses working together, and that we can do that best with the decibel level down. So the one point that had not been made is noise is not just an annoyance. Noise is a health hazard. Noise robs us of our health, our quality of life, our sleep, and adversely affects children. So I'm using the example of a study that I did over 40 years ago in the same community, which led to the actions that lowered the decibel levels, by the way, not just near the school. The transit authority agreed to use that procedure on the rail near schools and homes. So if we could have done it over 40 years ago, why can't we do it today? So I thank you for the efforts you're putting in, because it takes both data and activism to get results. It takes the cooperation of community, public officials, the media, very, very helpful, and in this case, academics that can provide the data. So good luck, and I'm hoping you're as successful as I was over 40 years ago.
Thank you so much. I feel like that was just like a spokesperson for everything that we believe in. So that's awesome. Data and activism is results. That was a great story. We should have a story for every open data journey. And so glad that you could join us. So as we wrap up, yeah, there's the Decibel organization. Is there a link, Emily or Z, that you want to share? Oh, there you go. Do we want to share this link out with everyone about the project? Emily?
Which link? You mean the radar?
It's a Facebook group.
Oh, the Facebook. Yeah,
the residents. Yeah, for respectful decibel levels in Inwood. Here, we'll just put it in the main message. And actually, if one of you could just put it in the chat, that'd be great. Any final questions before we move on to just share some last resources for the future and final words? Nope. Okay, great. So I'm just going to go through the slides like this quickly. We'll share out the slides with everyone at the end in a follow-up email. We just want to point out a few other resources that BetaNYC has available to folks. And I'll, sorry, unspotlight this video. We run our radar service, which is open to community organizations, borough president offices, council offices, and community boards. And you can use it to submit a request for data or research assistance. We have examples of projects that we have conducted with folks who've requested the service on the website. So just go to beta.nyc/radar. And then we're going to be hosting more events. So this is going to be a sort of monthly or every 2 months type of event. We're going to do open data journeys. We're also going to be having, it's not yet on the calendar and totally confirmed yet, but we're going to be doing some open data office hours in a few weeks around the release of the Open Data for All report that will allow you to ask questions to people who really are defining open data in New York City. So look forward to that. You can join our community to stay in the loop on Meetup with events that we're doing virtually. And going forward, I mean, we're excited. We're already in the planning stages for Open Data Week 2021, and we're getting very excited about it. So we'll probably have some calls for community representation in that at some point, so stay on the lookout for that. Any other updates, Gabby and Inej? Awesome apprentices, Emily Z.
Yeah, just that we're working on all of your wonderful radars that you have sent in, and we will respond promptly next week on a ton of noise complaints in CV12. Yep.
Yeah, and I want to shout out Gabby and Inej. Gabby and Inej were fellows with BetaNYC last year as part of our 2019 to 2020 Civic Innovation Fellowship at the Manhattan Borough President's Office. The fellowship is a program we run through the CUNY Service Corps that Emily and Z lead, and they're gearing up this just now for a new semester that's totally new format, which is exciting. But you know, they excelled in the program, and this summer we hired them on as apprentices, and we're so thrilled and grateful that they're able to join us and work with us on projects like events, radars, and just being part of our awesome team. So thank you so much. You both did incredible work in a short amount of time. And without further, I guess, yeah, we'll see you next time. And I guess, yeah, always, I misspelled that, but thank you to our supporters, especially Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer's office. We all miss you, and as well as Alfred Sloan Foundation, Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, who supports us fiscally through grants. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me or get in touch with us on Twitter. My email is kate@beta.nyc. And we'll follow up with email with slides, and if we have any other answers to questions, we'll share. And if anyone wants to stay and to say hello again, introduce yourself, feel free to come off of mute and say hello. We are always looking to say hello in this weird virtual environment.